Welcome to our webinar entitled Expedite Lot Traceability Searches and Recalls. Today, we'll look at our software and how you can quickly and accurately track down product issues. Now, you may have issues with a vendor delivery, and we'll track that through WIP to customer shipments, or a customer may have an issue with their received shipment, and we'll backtrack that into a batch job, and if necessary, backtrack it to a supplier delivery. Very happy to have Caleb Das, our Senior Solutions Consultant, joining me today. And Caleb is going to show us how our software receives vendor deliveries, which are lot controlled, and that's ingredients and packaging materials. Look at how our system deals with lot control ingredients, raw materials, as well as intermediates and finished goods within the facility. Look at how our system deals with lot control ingredients, raw material, packaging materials in WIP, and the finished goods that are coming out of a production line, and sales orders that require certain lot controlled finished goods and how we can pick them and ship them. And we'll be showing you how to do that with paper documents as well as mobile devices, in our case, a smart tablet. And finally, we'll show you how we can use a graphical lot traceability tool to basically do a bi-directional search from deliveries through production to shipments, and from shipments back through production to vendor deliveries. So let's start off with inbound activities. Here, we've got a vendor delivery and the receiving and put away tasks that one executes either with a barcode document or a mobile device, a smart tablet. We're going to go ahead and generate lot numbers against vendor manufacturing lot numbers. So we've got a cross reference association between our internal lot number and that vendor lot number. We'll capture that. We'll generate and affix a product label, and that could have a barcoded lot number in it, as well as expiration date, item information as well. And then we'll put that away, or we may divert it into QC for inspection. And of course, once we're in the inspection, we also want to capture and validate the lot number of that sample in QC. And then after it's been released, put it away into storage. Now in storage, we can execute a spot check, schedule a cycle count, as well as schedule inspections. And that's what we would call a stability test of volatile ingredients within the facility. And for these particular tasks, we're going to, again, capture and validate the lot number of that inventory in that location. Now, when we put away product, in addition to the product label, we can attach a pre-printed license or generate licenses if we're in a license environment to put that product away. We also can simply just add a product label and put that away by SKU and quantity to a location, or we could do multiple SKUs to multiple locations. In all these particular put away cases, again, the key here is to capture and validate the lot number. And Caleb's going to show us how to set up a receiving lot number mask. And again, that's how to associate a vendor manufacturing lot number to our internally generated lot number. He'll address receiving a PO, line item, and generating product labels. And then go through the put away tasks, spot check, cycle count, and inspection tasks. So with that said, let me hand it over to Caleb.
Thanks, John. The first thing we're going to look at as part of our purchasing process is how our system does its lot tracking. And the basis for this lot tracking, whether it happens to be on a raw material, a finished good, an intermediate, a batch, whatever, is via the batch masking feature that is set up right here on the item master. It can be a Julian date, or you can have a prefix followed by a date, or really any combination thereof. It's going to look something like this. And you can set any of these types of characters set the values, and then the system is going to use that to auto-generate the lot numbers when you receive this particular raw material. In this case, the raw material that we're going to follow through this webinar is RM1053 burdock root powder. From here in the batch options section of the item master, you can also set the automatic expiry days. In this case, it's 300 days from date of receipt for every lot. So that's the recommendation for the expiry. And you can also set the issue method, the allocation method that this particular item is going to follow. So throughout the process, if you've set FIFO, it's going to suggest the first lot of items. So let's go to WMS and receive this raw material. So our WMS, it looks like this, and we're going to receive based on a purchase order that was previously set in the system, which will now execute from the mobile. This mobile, as you can see, is tile-based, it's device agnostic. In this case, I'm going to go into the inbound, the goods receipt PO, and then receive to the last purchase order from this one for this burdock root powder. I'm supposed to receive 100 pounds of this. I can choose to receive it onto a pallet by scanning my pallet number, or clicking on the Get LPN to auto-generate the pallet number with pallet label, barcode, which I can then scan. But the important thing here is that based on the setup that you saw out on the desktop, the lots/serial number is automatically generated based on that numbering series. So is the expiration date that we talked about previously. And in this case, because we're going to follow a put-away process, I'm going to receive this into the receiving bin. But if you wanted to receive it directly into some other bin, you're able to do that from here. I'm also going to, if there is a lot strength that you need to capture, you can capture it there. I'm going to hit done. And what this does is it's going to generate the goods receipt PO directly out of the system in real time. And that label looks something like this. So I can go back into the same PO and receive, if I had done a partial, I can go back in the same PO, receive the remainder with the same process, in which in some cases you might have the same vendor sending the same lot on 2 trucks, or maybe 2 different lots, 2 different vendor lot numbers. Either way, it's the same process, and you can print out as many labels as you need. As now that I received the lot, my warehouse manager might automatically get a notification that tells me that some lots have arrived and need to be put away. They can execute that transaction from an inventory transfer document within the desktop, and it'll basically look like a bin transfer. But maybe they want to execute the put away out using someone out on the floor who's going to receive a printed copy of this put away list, and then they can go ahead and execute it on mobile. And this is what that printed copy looks like. So on WMS, all I'm going to do is to execute that put away is basically do that bin transfer, which that document converts to. And it's already, I can scan all those things in, and it's already got the bin locations and the items and lots and things on it. So I can scan it, and when I'm done, what I'm doing is I'm moving this lot from the receiving bin to the warehouse location. I enter all the appropriate information, and the system then generates that inventory transfer into the receiving bin, from the receiving bin into the next location, whether that's for a quarantine reason or something else. In addition to doing all of the put-away tasks, I might also be asked to execute a spot count out on the floor, or just do a stock inquiry. I can do this from the Adjustment and Countings tab, or I can do it from the Inquiry tab. Either way, I'm going to start with a spot count. So if I were to enter the raw material, RM1053, I can see the lot statuses, as well as all of the bins and all the quantities for all of the lots, and all of the historical locations of this particular lot ever moved to within my warehouse. And while doing that, I can also select the last lot that we just moved, and I can reduce the quantity if I needed. So I'm reducing down to by 5, and if I were to hit submit, that generates that goods issue, and it issues that out for damage or something like that. I might also be asked to execute a cycle count. A cycle count, friend, can be executed on the desktop, and it makes recommendations. And these are set based on either bin location or an item group. Right now, we're doing a monthly cycle count for just this particular item, the burdock root. I can also do it by preferred vendor for an item or an item group. I can also have it do a monthly count of only things that are in one particular bin or multiple bins. And what that does is it picks up the appropriate cycle, and then it generates an inventory count document on desktop, which prints out and looks something like this. This document can then be executed out on the floor in the inventory counting tile. You go to that, inventory counting. From here, I can scan in the last, put in the item code. I can scan in the item code, and then it brings up the appropriate lots, which I can then scan again. And I can adjust the quantities up and down, and the difference then, again, goes into that variance account. So this is another example of the type of tasks that are lot specific that I can do out on the warehouse floor. In addition to all of this, I might also have to do, as part of my receiving or my regular inventory stability processes, I might have to do some QC testing. That can be executed from the QC dashboard, where you can see all of the open tests in the assigned test tab. So for us, because quality happens at every stage, whether that's production, purchase, inventory, stability, et cetera, or sales, I can assign these tests to various users and have them be assigned and performed out on the warehouse floor, and for QA to deal with it when it hits desktop. In addition, I can put in the days, the stability days, and I can have the system auto-generate a number of stability tests for me directly out of the system. And then it'll show up in the assigned test. So let's take a look at what one of those will look like in the system. So it's got the lot numbers, a test quantity, and all of that. And right now we're only doing an oil strength test, which I can execute from here. Because we've defined on the item master the expected upper and lower control values, if the system falls, it lets the user pick the value. And if it falls within those control limits, then it automatically passes. And I can submit it, and that test record gets saved successfully. And then when I come back to it, now it has changed to in progress. So you know that this lot is being tested, and it's on this, and it's automatically passed, and it's moved from status release to status in progress. I can evaluate it, and if there's a hold status or something like that, I can have QA release it to production or inventory or any other activity thereof. All right, so those are the kinds of tasks that you can do on the receiving side that are lot track. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Caleb. Now we've gone ahead and put away the ingredients in storage, as well as raw materials, the packaging materials, in inventory as well. And now we're going to go ahead and go through the batch order process. We're going to create a batch ticket. And in that batch ticket, we're going to allocate the best inventory for that particular job. And we're going to allocate it by lot number. And in that particular case, we're going to generate product issues, inventory issue tasks. We're going to go ahead and identify the item, the location, the lot number. We're going to pull it from that location, and we're going to pull it into a location next to the production line. That might be a staging location right next to a piece of equipment. Then, once it's there, we will go ahead and issue that inventory, the ingredients or the raw material, to that particular process cell. And then it's within WIP now. So we go through the make and the fill processes. And at the end, we're going to produce some yield of finished good. We can then go ahead and generate and affix a product label to that as well. And that will have a lot number. And that lot number is an internally generated lot number for that finished good. And we will then issue a number of put away tasks, and that could be on a barcoded document. And it will also be available to execute on the mobile device. And we'll go ahead and capture and validate that lot number information as we pick it up and put it away into the designated storage locations. Very similarly to the ingredients and packaging materials that we saw during the inbound process, we also can go ahead and do spot checks, cycle counts, and inspection plans against those finished goods in inventory. And naturally we'll capture and validate that lot number information. Now, one of the key things to lot traceability, searches and recalls, is to maintain that association between raw material lot numbers to finished goods lot numbers. Then it's putting away that product in various methods. So with that said, Caleb will pick it up from here. He'll show us how to set up a lot number mask for finished goods coming out of a WIP. We'll look at a batch job, specifically the lot allocation of the best inventory for the job. We'll do a raw materials issue, and that's again to the ingredients and to the packaging materials. And then out of WIP, once we have a yield, we'll go ahead and identify those finished goods and we'll put those away. And then finally, we'll look at the transaction that keeps that association between a finished good lot number and its raw material lot numbers, ingredients, and packaging materials. All right, over to you, Caleb.
Thanks, John. So production begins with making sure, just like in the raw materials, with making sure that the lot masking for the finished good item that we're going to look at is set up correctly. We're going to be following the herbal release capsules, and it's a similar lot masking to the you saw with the raw material, right? But you might choose to add a prefix if required here, like FG or something like that. The expiry days in these cases, you might want to base it on the nearest raw material expiry, so that if it's made with a raw material lot that's about to expire, the finished good lot should also have a nearer expiry date than it otherwise would. Or you can just use a standard expiry date or manually enter your own, either way. In addition, you can also, just as you did with the raw material, you can also decide the allocation methodology here. And then the system is going to recommend that to be the way that this particular item is going to be allocated to any kind of document. So first, let's just take a look at a batch ticket that's made out of this particular item. So based on everything that's in the formula and bill of materials, which we've covered in a previous webinar, the batch ticket has generated the expected quantities of raw materials onto the formula tab, as well as the quantity required, the lot strength, the actual quantities, and so on, as well as the finished goods and packaging material that are required in order to make this batch. In addition, it's also looked at the runtime on this particular process cell, the batch weight, batch volume, etc. But the important thing is that there is a batch number that is associated with making this particular lot. The first thing you might do at this stage is you might just decide to size the batch. So sizing the batch, because all of the requirements are coming off of the formula bill of materials, you can size those requirements up and down based on the finished good requirement or a material shortage. So one of the raw materials is short. What do you do then? Like, you want to size the batch down based on your shortage. You can do all of that at this stage simply by putting in the appropriate quantities for each of those items. And then it'll proportionally size it up or down. The next thing, at this point, you might also decide to print your batch ticket and set it out for the guys out on the floor. Then you might choose to allocate it. Now, not all of our customers do a proper allocation step, but this is what it would look like if you did. All the required raw materials are shown along with all of the various lots and the lot quantities, availability, expiry, all of that stuff. And the system's going to make some recommendations based on what you put into the item master, which you previously saw. And if you're happy with everything, you can just hit auto select and accept what the system has offered. Right now it's in status released, and if I were to hit update, it's going to move it to an allocated stage. So this can be a hard allocation or a soft allocation. A hard allocation will prevent any other lots from being issued other than what you've allocated to this particular batch, and your pickers out on the floor can't override it. So this stage, once these are allocated, you might choose to print out your production pick list. So this is what that would look like. It's got the same barcoded raw material list, what the location is, what process cell it is, and the people are just going to scan in and out of those. It's pretty straightforward. And you're going to, based on what's been allocated, you're going to do that picking. Go to the last one in the production picking, and I can see the quantity that needs to be picked and the suggestion, as well as where I'm going to stage this for production. So I can choose that, choose the appropriate lot, pick, do the same thing for the other one. Pick, and when I'm done, what I'm going to do is stage it, and staging just moves it from the initial location into the production staging area. So it's basically a bin transfer that's happening. So staging, however, does not, at this point, move anything into WIP. Moving things into WIP is done at the issue step. So right now, it's only in the allocate step. If I were to hit issue batch instead, then I'd have a very similar screen to what I already saw on the allocate. Now, not all of our customers, as I mentioned before, have that allocate step, and you prefer to just print out a batch ticket, use that to run their process from desktop, and then you just go directly to the issue step. In that case, you're just going to skip directly to this step, but even otherwise, you can come here, and system's still going to make the same recommendations it made to you based on the allocation methodology. You're simply going to hit issue. If you wanted to use a non-standard lot or something like that, you'd select that from the lot list down there, and then that is what's going to be issued into WIP. So this is the point at which something has moved into WIP, and the status is changed to issue. Now that it's all been issued, you might want to receive it. You want to receive the finished good. So I can issue the raw materials, but I can also receive the finished goods here. So I can receive it onto a pallet. I can auto generate a pallet number. Now the system's telling me that it's expecting me to have 318,000 of these capsules. And it's also auto-generated that lot. It's picked a default bin. You can have the system auto-generate an expiry date. But what you might choose to do, you might also choose to receive this in part. There might be some loss. So you might receive only 300 instead of 318. You might choose to receive it in stages, so 100 at a time, 100 at a time. All you do in that case is you're just going to hit save. And you keep moving on, and the quantity up here, what was supposed to be 318 has now moved down to 0. Now I can simply hit submit. And then it's going to do the submit step, and now it's going to move the finished good out of WIP and into the onto the batch. So now it's in status part closed. Now if I were to right click and hit the production goods transaction report, I can really see everything about this. I can see the bins that all of the various lots that were allocated and issued to this particular batch, what bins they were, what lots they were, how much of each of those items were issued, how much was received, what pallet numbers it went out on, and most importantly, on the far right, you can see the amount. So this is the basis of what we have in our system called lot costing. which is about the most accurate you can get. And this cost layer is maintained for every batch. So you always have an accurate idea what the costs are at each step of the transaction, and that too is lot tracked. So that's one of the cool things that we have in production. All right, back to you, John.
Well, thank you, Caleb. Well, now he showed us that we've gone ahead and stored the finished goods in the warehouse, and that could be full pallets, less than full pallets, cartons, cases, what have you. And we're going to look at sales order fulfillment process. We could look at one sales order and do a strict order picking for that one particular sales order, or we may want to group sales orders together, perhaps either by the small parcel, FedEx or UPS for the day, or an LTL, a customer delivery date. Those are the various criteria in which we can group sales orders together. And in both cases, a single order or multiple or group of orders, we'll go ahead and we'll allocate the best inventory for those orders by lot number, of course, and then we'll generate the pick tasks to the floor, and they'll go out and pick the appropriate inventory and bring it to the staging area in the shipping area. In this particular case, a lot of times small parcel will just pick up their packages in their designated area. So we may just want to pick and ship it. In other cases, like an LTL or full truckload, we may want to pick it and stage it and then do an additional step of actually loading and shipping that product into the truck itself. Of course, in all these particular tasks, whether we use barcoded documents or the smart tablet, the picking process and the shipping process will capture and validate the lot numbers. So Caleb's going to show us again the sales order and what a pick wave might look at, and that's a group of sales orders, the lot allocation against that, the generation of the pick tasks, execute the pick tasks, as well as executing the ship tasks. All right, over to you again, Caleb.
Thanks, John. So the delivery portion of the webinar for us begins with a sales order. Now this sales order, number 1066, is for 100 units of this herbal release 120 count capsules, which we want to deliver. Since every document in our system is intended to tie into the next logical document for that kind of traceability, end-to-end traceability, that includes the sales order. So I can do the delivery on desktop if I wanted to, without even going to mobile or doing any picking, by simply copying the sales order directly to the delivery. It tells me the name of the base document. It's based on sales order 1066. And if I were to hit add, it's going to show me all the lots that are available. And it's going to make some recommendations based, again, on the allocation methodology that I set up in item master, whether that's FIFO, FIFO, LIFO. Right? So if I hit auto select, it's going to do all that. I can update it. But more often than not, this is not going to be my process. I'm not going to be doing all of this on desktop. I probably want to generate a pick list and send it out to the folks out on the floor. I can do it directly from the sales order simply by clicking on Generate Pick List. Check that off, select the appropriate lots. Again, the same screen that you saw previously. Hit Update, and go through that process. But the important thing here to note is that there is a fulfillment percentage for each of these items, and that is also lot tracked. And you can tell how much of this order can be fulfilled directly right now, right here. So this is available to release, and because that is more than what is required, the fulfillment percentage is 100%. And you're going to see this concept over and over again when we go further into this webinar. So, but let's take a look at what that pick list actually looks like. So it's going to, again, have the same customer name, the item name, barcoded locations, and all of that stuff. And you can then execute it from mobile. But before we get to that, you might also want to have multiple orders that you want to pick at the same time based on certain criteria. In that case, I can use the pickback manager. So I can pick to a particular warehouse if I've got multiple warehouse locations, or a posting date, or a date range, or a fulfillment percentage. So I'm only fulfilling things that are between 80 to 100% I'm able to fulfill, or I can base it on a document currency, a document date, a ship to location, a dimension, a cost center, anything like that. So any criteria that you can think of, you can sort of narrow down your pick list based on that. And you can sort it by the delivery date or the document number, warehouse priority, and so on. So if you were doing all of these at the same time, then all you have to do is check all of the appropriate orders that you'd like to fulfill, release them to the pick list. And it's the same basic procedure based on the allocation methodology. The system is going to recommend some lots to you. If you're happy with everything, you can hit auto select. But if you would prefer to do something manually, you can type in the amounts of each lot that you would like to move over, hit update, and you move through the entire process. And when you're done and those lots have been allocated, you can bring up the pick list generation wizard. This allows you to do some changes on how you want your pick list to be organized. Are you picking based on a particular warehouse location or a group of warehouse locations? Are you trying to group the pick list by the customer, by the item group, by the item? Do you want to pick only all the flammable stuff first, or do you want to only pick a certain type of extract? And then also you have to think about how you want your pickers to go about picking it. Do you want them to go in alphabetical order, some other order, or do you want to optimize for the least number of steps so that they first go to the bin with the most items and go in a descending order? So you pick bit from bins where you know there is more than enough inventory, or do you want to minimize their and that will minimize their walking? Or do you want to go to the bins with the least items and basically clear out the inventory and maximize bin efficiency? Like, what is your logic? So that depends entirely upon you, of course. But whatever it is, we can support it. And when you're done, you'll have a pick list and you'll assign it to a particular user, and they can then go ahead and pick it on the mobile, right? So that's the step that we're going to do next. We're going to select the pick list number, hit next, and that's for the herbal caps that we talked about previously. I'm going to pick it from this bin. And if I pick something that is not recommended, it'll tell me. So I'm going to pick something that is been allocated, override it, and I can pick it up. And once it's picked, it goes into the picked bucket. Now, based on what my process is, I can choose to do one of two things. I can choose to stage it, i.e. move the inventory to a staging area for pickup by the LTL, which is what John talked about previously. Or I can automatically generate that delivery document directly from here if my picker is also the one who's getting it out the door. So that's what these buttons down here do. Or I can hit complete, I can come back to it and then stage it in one ship stage location. And then when the LTL is come to pick it up, check this off, and then it goes out the door. You can do all of those processes all on the same screen. So right now I'm just going to deliver this. And once the item is delivered, you're going to have a document number that you'll see, and I'm going to show you what exactly that looks like. So I'm going to go to the last delivery that we just did, and it's you can see that it's based on a pick list and it's based on this particular sales order. And I can go to the relationship map that we saw on a previous webinar, and I can see that you can see the sales order that it generated, and if that sales order happened to have a down payment or things like that, you can see it directly from that relationship map. And that's one form of the end-to-end traceability that we're talking about. All right, now back to you, John.
Thanks, Caleb. Well, now we've gone ahead and we've shipped out all those customer orders, and we may find the case of a customer complaint. Customer has a particular issue, So we want to track down his particular shipment, the item that he has an issue with, the lot number for it, and we're going to backtrack it into the batch job in which it was produced. Then if we decide that there's issues in the process itself, perhaps there's issues with some of the ingredients or packaging materials, we can backtrack it to that specific vendor delivery. Now we may have a vendor issue with one of their delivered products, so we'll track it from receiving the put away, from storage into WIP, and then look at the finished goods that were produced and the finished goods that were shipped to the various customers. In all those particular cases, we can generate recall letters to the customers, and we can do some recall notices as well to the vendors. Now, anywhere within this, if we have a production issue, we can use this graphical tool that we're going to show you to look in a bi-directional way, as well as dive down deep into the quality control tests that were done through this whole entire process. So it's important to recognize that you need to have comprehensive lot management functionality to be able to search and recall suspect products in a matter of minutes. And Caleb showed us all these various activities, again, receiving put away, production, picking, shipping, and how we capture, validate that lot number using paper documents and the mobile device. So let's have a look at the graphical lot traceability tool. Let me go ahead and hand it back over to Caleb.
Thanks, John. So now, because we have that end-to-end traceability baked into every step of our process, we saw it on purchasing, we saw it in production, we saw it on sales delivery, we always know what lots went out to the customer. So 6 months down the line, if customer service gets a complaint and they've got to enter it into the system, they can go to the complaint entry screen and enter the details. So simply by putting in the order number and the item number, they're always able to tell what lots went out in that particular order to that customer. And then they can fill in the details about the complaint, put in some of the additional tabs like store attachments, put in more information about the investigation, capture the action taken, other such steps, which we discussed in much more detail in the quality webinar. But for now, our focus is just on this herbal release capsules that we've been following the entire way through. Right, so let's look at how we got to this, which we can do using the lot traceability dashboard. So lot traceability dashboard is this particular screen from where you can do what's called a lot explosion, which will trace it down from the finished good right down to the raw materials, or the other way around, backwards from the raw material all the way down to the various finished goods that it ultimately went into. You can then look at where it was produced, how much is on hand, where it all ended up, what bin, what the receipt date is, what the expiry date, QC details, etc. And if I've got multiple sales against the same lot, they display it like vertically like this. And it's all nodal, so I can expand it out. I can see that it went into this particular production job. I can trace it to this particular packaging item PO. But I can also trace it out as many nodes as I want to. So I'm just going through its entire life cycle, and you can see that down here. But what that allows me to do is trace it from the sales order right down to the purchase order. And I can zoom in and out using my mouse wheel. So basically what I've done here is run a relationship map for production. And of course, if I don't want to see it graphically, I can always do it in the grid view, and it'll bring up the lots in a different format, like that. So you've got the same level of detail, which you can then export to Excel or PDF, and that really speeds up your mock recall, your audit, or an even actual recall process. But ultimately what that does is it also allows you to trace from the same place, right? You can also trace back the raw material. So let's look at that burdock RM 1053 that we've been following this entire way. Let's see what it was used in. So I can trace it from the purchase receipt all down to this was only used in one particular lot, but I can trace it all the way to the end. So what that does for me is it allows me to generate a bulk lot recall letter, which I would do from the screen. So if I can enter this minimum amount of information, I can automatically generate this. So this is what that lot recall letter looks like. It's a crystal report, so you can modify it however you need to be. And it shows you the address to ship things to, customer information. So you can take your lot recall process down from a matter of days to a matter of minutes. Track customer sale all the way from the sale to the purchase of raw material, and you have full end-to-end loss control and traceability. You can see your QA steps, all of that. Anyways, that brings me to the end of everything that I had to show you guys. So now it's back to you, John.
Thanks, Caleb. Well, I hope you can see that lot traceability and recall really depends on the comprehensive lot management capabilities within the manufacturing and your warehousing processes. As you can see, lot traceability really goes from inbound through manufacturing to outbound. We can execute that with mobile warehousing on the smart devices. Obviously, when you're using a mobile device, you're capturing the worker's ID, so CFR11, and you are also capturing, validating the lot number on the spot rather than using paper and bringing that over to a workstation and then scanning that in at that point. So there's obvious benefits in using the mobile warehousing when it comes to lot traceability and recall. Now, Caleb was using our end-to-end ERP solution, but the functionality that he showed you is available in our manufacturing app that runs with QuickBooks, Sage, Microsoft, and SAP. For more information about our end-to-end ERP solution or our add-on manufacturing app for leading financials, you can visit our website or simply email me. Thanks so much.